Supreme Commander Vex stood before the Conquest Gallery, watching holographic displays of 1,000 burning worlds. Each image represented a species that had fallen before the Krithax dominion. Each one had tried to resist. Each one had failed. The command chamber hummed with quiet efficiency as officers reviewed tactical data from their latest victory. The Salthan Collective had surrendered after only 3 days of fighting. Their military commanders had watched Krithax soldiers march through plasma fire without hesitation, without breaking formation, without showing the slightest concern for survival. The Salthan broke first. They always did. "Commander, the planetary scans are complete," Officer Drex reported, his voice flat and mechanical. Emotion was inefficient. The Krithax had evolved past such weaknesses long ago. Vex turned from the gallery, his tall frame casting shadows across the metallic floor. His species had no concept of fear built into their biology. Where other races possessed neural structures that triggered panic, hesitation, or self-preservation instincts, the Krithax had nothing. They could calculate risk, but they could not feel dread. They understood death as data, not as something to avoid at all costs. This made them perfect conquerors. "Show me the resources," Vex commanded. Holographic charts filled the air between them. Mineral deposits, water reserves, agricultural potential. The Salthan homeworld would serve the Dominion well. Already, occupation forces were establishing control grids across major population centers. The natives would work, or they would be removed. Simple calculations. "Any resistance movements detected?" Vex asked. 17 forming in southern territories, Drex answered. "Projected suppression time?" 4 days. Vex nodded once. Resistance was predictable. Species always clung to hope, even after defeat. That hope would fade quickly enough when they realized the Krithax could not be intimidated, could not be frightened into retreat, could not be broken by threats or shows of force. Fear worked both ways in war. The Krithax felt none, which meant enemy psychological tactics failed completely. Meanwhile, their own relentless advance broke enemy spirits in days rather than years. The tactical screens shifted, showing battle footage from the Salthan campaign. Krithax soldiers advanced through streets, while enemy forces fired from fortified positions. Several Krithax fell, bodies torn apart by explosive rounds. The soldiers behind them stepped over the corpses without pausing, without changing expression, without the slightest acknowledgement that death walked beside them. They simply calculated new approach vectors and continued forward. That was when defenders broke. That was when they realized they faced something unnatural. "Commander, the Galactic Council has sent another communication," an officer announced from the communication station. "Delete it," Vex said without looking up. "They threaten economic sanctions. They have threatened sanctions for the past 47 conquests. They will continue threatening. They will not act." Vex pulled up a star chart showing Krithax territory, spreading like a dark stain across the galaxy map. Fear governs their decisions. They fear the cost of opposing us more than they hate what we do. The irony was not lost on him. The very emotion his species lacked was the tool they used most effectively against others. Every species they encountered was controlled by fear to some degree. Fear of death, fear of pain, fear of loss. The Krithax simply had to exist, had to demonstrate their absolute lack of survival instinct, and enemy forces crumbled. "What is our next target?" Drex asked. Vex expanded the star chart, highlighting sectors beyond their current borders. The mapping division had been conducting deep space surveys for months, cataloging potential conquests. Several promising systems appeared in the display, each color-coded by strategic value. "Sector 7. An analyst spoke up. "Scout ships returned yesterday. With preliminary reports. Show me." A blue-white planet appeared in the hologram, rotating slowly. Oceans covered most of its surface, with large land masses scattered across hemispheres. Preliminary scans showed significant technological development. Cities, agriculture, industrial complexes, defense satellites in orbit, though nothing that would pose a real challenge to Krithak's fleet power. Species designation? Vex asked. They call themselves humans, the analyst replied. Single-planet civilization, approximately 8 billion population. Technology level comparable to the Velthan hegemony before their conquest. Vex remembered the Velthan campaign, 6 days from first contact to complete surrender. The Velthan had possessed impressive weapons technology, but their warrior culture had been built entirely around honor and courage. When they encountered an enemy that felt no honor and needed no courage because they could not feel fear, their entire military philosophy collapsed. Military capabilities? Standard orbital defense platforms, nuclear weapons in their early space-age range, chemical propulsion spacecraft, ground forces equipped with projectile and energy weapons. Nothing exceptional. The analyst paused. They do have extensive cultural data available through their communication networks. They appear to value individual freedom highly. This may make occupation more complex than standard protocols. Vex dismissed the concern with a gesture. Every species valued something. Every species had cultural elements they believed made them special. None of it mattered when faced with an enemy that could not be deterred by sacrifice, martyrdom, or last stands. The Krithaks would land. They would establish control. The humans would resist briefly, then submit to mathematical inevitability. Prepare First Fleet, Vex ordered. Standard pacification protocols. Begin with orbital superiority, followed by demonstration strikes, followed by ground occupation of major population centers. Estimated conquest time? Drex inquired. Vex studied the planet, rotating in the hologram. The humans had spread across their world with impressive efficiency. Their cities showed sophisticated organization. Their satellite network indicated advanced communication systems. But none of that would matter against an enemy they could not frighten and could not outlast. 1 week for initial surrender, Vex calculated. 2 additional weeks for complete occupation. Officers moved to execute his commands, their movements precise and emotionless. Within hours, First Fleet would leave Krithak space and begin the jump toward the human homeworld. Within days, another species would learn what the galaxy had already discovered. Nothing could stop the fearless. Vex turned back to the conquest gallery, already imagining a new hologram added to the collection. A blue-white planet, wreathed in the red glow of Krithak's occupation. Earth, they called it. Soon, it would simply be Conquest 742. He felt no anticipation, no excitement, no bloodlust. He felt nothing except the cold satisfaction of efficient execution. Another world, another victory, another proof that in a universe governed by fear, the species that felt none would always triumph. The command chamber doors sealed behind him as he left to oversee fleet preparations. Behind him, the conquest gallery continued its silent display. 1,000 dead worlds bearing witness to the unstoppable advance of the fearless Krithak's dominion. The Krithak's First Fleet emerged from jump space at the edge of the solar system. 97 warships, arranged in perfect geometric formation. Within minutes, their sensors mapped every human satellite, defense platform, and military installation. The calculations confirmed initial assessments. Earth possessed nothing that could threaten them. Supreme Commander Vex stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching Earth grow larger in the viewscreen. The blue planet looked peaceful from this distance, clouds drifting across oceans, city lights visible on the night side. Appearances meant nothing. Soon those cities would fly Krithak's banners, open all communication channels. Vex ordered. Broadcast surrender terms in their dominant languages. The message went out across every frequency humanity used. The terms were simple and non-negotiable. Lay down all weapons. Submit to Krithak's authority. Resistance would be met with overwhelming force. Compliance would allow human civilization to continue under occupation. The choice was theirs. But the outcome was predetermined. 37 minutes passed before Earth responded. A holographic display activated, showing a human woman in formal diplomatic attire. She appeared calm, her face neutral, her posture composed. The translation software identified her as Ambassador Min-Ji Park, representative of the Unified Human Defense Council. "This is Ambassador Park speaking on behalf of Earth," she began, her voice steady. "We have received your terms. We request time to discuss your demands with our global leadership. Such a decision cannot be made hastily." Vex studied her face, analyzing micro-expressions with Krithak's precision. Humans possessed sophisticated emotional responses. Their biology was saturated with fear mechanisms, adrenaline systems, panic triggers. Yet this ambassador showed none of the obvious signs. Either she was exceptionally disciplined, or humanity had more control over their emotional responses than typical species. "You have 6 hours," Vex replied. "At the end of that time, we will begin demonstrations of our capabilities. Further delays will result in increased casualties." Min-Ji nodded once. 6 hours. Understood. The communication ended. Vex turned to his tactical officer. "Monitor all human military movements. Catalog defensive preparations." What followed over the next 6 hours was predictable. Human forces mobilized worldwide. Fighter craft launched from air bases. Naval vessels moved to combat stations. Ground forces established defensive perimeters around major cities. Civilian populations began evacuation procedures, flooding roads and transit systems in patterns that suggested panic. "They are afraid," Drex observed, watching the tactical displays. "Standard fear. Response to superior force," Vex agreed. The human reaction matched every previous conquest. Fear drove them to pointless defensive measures that would accomplish nothing against Krithak's technology. Fear sent civilians fleeing from cities in chaotic patterns that disrupted their own military logistics. Fear made them predictable. When 6 hours expired, Min-Ji Park appeared again on the communication channel. "We need more time," she said simply. "Our political systems require extensive consultation." "Denied," Vex responded. "Beginning demonstrations." He cut the channel and issued targeting orders. 3 demonstration strikes, calculated for maximum psychological impact with minimum strategic damage. The first targeted an uninhabited island in the Pacific Ocean. The second vaporized an abandoned industrial complex in a remote region. The third destroyed a decommissioned military base that satellites confirmed was empty. The message was clear. Krithak's weapons could strike anywhere on Earth with perfect precision. Resistance was futile. "Deploy landing forces," Vex commanded. "Begin with coastal cities. Establish control grids in high population centers." The first wave launched from fleet carriers, dropships cutting through Earth's atmosphere in controlled descents. They landed in 12 cities simultaneously, choosing locations near government centers and military installations. Krithak soldiers emerged from the craft in perfect formation, weapons ready, prepared for whatever resistance humans offered. What happened next confused every calculation. The first landing zone in Los Angeles showed typical patterns initially. Human military forces had established defensive positions around the landing site. As Krithak's soldiers advanced, humans opened fire with conventional weapons. Bullets and energy blasts struck Krithak's infantry, some finding gaps in armor, some killing soldiers outright. The Krithaks did not slow down. They never did. They walked through the defensive fire with mechanical precision, calculating trajectories, returning fire with superior accuracy. Human forces should have broken at that point. Seeing an enemy advance without hesitation should have triggered panic responses. Instead, human soldiers retreated in organized patterns, falling back into the city streets in ways that suggested planning rather than panic. "They are implementing urban warfare tactics," the tactical officer reported. "Using buildings for cover, establishing crossfire positions, employing hit and run strikes. Vex frowned. Not at the tactics themselves, which were standard for defending forces, but at the execution. Humans should be breaking down by now. Fear should be overwhelming their command structure. Instead, they were fighting with disciplined efficiency. In Tokyo, the pattern repeated. In Mumbai, in Sao Paulo, human forces engaged, inflicted casualties, then melted into urban terrain. Before Krithak's forces could establish overwhelming superiority, they were not standing and fighting. They were harassing, disrupting, forcing the Krithaks to fight for every block. Casualties? Vex asked. 17% of landing forces engaged in combat, higher than projected. 17% in the first day. That exceeded losses from the entire Velthan campaign. Vex studied tactical feeds from multiple cities, watching Krithak soldiers advance through streets that seemed abandoned, only to face sudden ambushes from unexpected angles. Night fell across Earth's surface, and the nature of the combat changed. Human forces began using darkness as a weapon. They cut power to city blocks, plunging streets into shadow, then struck from concealed positions. Krithak's soldiers had superior night vision technology, but humans were employing tactics that seemed designed specifically to create confusion rather than achieve military victories. In New York, a Krithak's patrol entered an abandoned subway station, pursuing retreating human forces. What they found was darkness, strange sounds echoing through tunnels, and a series of small, explosive charges that killed 3 soldiers while accomplishing no strategic objective. The survivors reported difficulty determining enemy positions due to acoustic interference. In Berlin, human forces broadcast high-frequency sound through city streets that disrupted Krithak's communication equipment. The sounds accomplished nothing militarily, but forced soldiers to fight without coordination for 17 minutes until jamming countermeasures could be deployed. In Seoul, a Krithak's company encountered something unprecedented. They entered a residential district that appeared evacuated. As they advanced, children's music began playing from speakers throughout the area. Then laughter. Then screams. The sounds came from every direction, overlapping, creating a wall of noise that served no tactical purpose Vex could identify. Yet it delayed the advance by 40 minutes while soldiers cleared every building to locate the source. "Commander," Drex said carefully, "human tactics are not following standard patterns. They are expending resources on psychological operations that should be ineffective against Krithak's forces." Vex studied the data. Drex was correct. Humans were using fear-based tactics against an enemy that felt no fear. They were wasting ammunition on harassment strikes instead of concentrated defense. They were prioritizing confusion over casualties. They do not understand what they face, Vex concluded. They employ tactics designed for enemies that can be frightened. Once they realize these methods are useless, they will adapt or collapse. But even as he spoke the words, doubt crept into his calculations for the first time in his military career. Not fear, which he could not feel, but simple mathematical uncertainty. The projected conquest timeline was already exceeding estimates. Human resistance was lasting longer than it should, not because they were stronger, but because they were behaving irrationally. On the view screen, Earth rotated slowly, city lights dimming as humans cut power to deny Krithak's targeting data. Somewhere down there, Minji Park and 8 billion humans were making decisions that did not fit any model Vex understood. He logged the first day as a tactical delay, not a defeat. Tomorrow, Krithak's forces would double their deployment. Human resistance would be crushed through overwhelming numerical superiority. But as he reviewed casualty reports from 12 cities, watching footage of humans employing tactics that made no logical sense, Vex experienced something his species had no word for. It was not fear, but it was the cold recognition that he had made an error in his calculations. He simply did not know yet what that error was. 3 months had passed since the first Krithak's landing, and Supreme Commander Vex stared at reports that contradicted everything his species understood about conquest. The Krithaks controlled every major Earth city. Their forces occupied government centers, military bases, and strategic infrastructure. By every military metric, Earth had fallen. Yet human resistance had not ended. It had evolved. Captain Jae-sung Choi crouched in the ruins of what had once been a shopping district in Seoul, watching a Krithax patrol move through the rubble-strewn street below. 15 enemy soldiers, standard formation, sweeping sector by sector with mechanical precision. They showed no caution, no hesitation, no concern for ambush. They could not feel fear, which meant they walked into every trap humans set. Jae-sung had learned that lesson in the first week of occupation. The Krithax were not brave. Bravery required overcoming fear. They were simply empty of survival instinct. He signaled to his team, scattered through buildings on both sides of the street. 12 humans, armed with improvised weapons and salvaged military equipment. They were not soldiers by training. Jae-sung had been a civil engineer before the invasion. His team included teachers, factory workers, medical technicians. But 3 months of survival had taught them what formal military training could not. How to fight an enemy that felt nothing. The Krithax patrol reached the intersection. Speakers hidden throughout the district activated simultaneously, broadcasting sounds humans had spent weeks perfecting. Screaming. Laughter. Whispers in languages the Krithax could not understand. Children crying, glass breaking. The sounds overlapped and echoed, coming from everywhere and nowhere. The patrol stopped, not from fear but from tactical confusion. Their sensors detected no targets, only audio signatures. They began scanning buildings systematically, trying to locate the source. This was exactly what Jae-sung wanted. While they focused on phantom sounds, his team activated the real trap. The street beneath them collapsed. Not entirely, just enough to trap their legs in rubble and twisted metal. Then the explosives detonated, carefully placed charges that killed 8 soldiers instantly. The survivors tried to establish defensive positions, but they were trapped, unable to move, unable to feel the panic that would have driven other species to desperate action. Jae-sung's team picked them off methodically, firing from concealed positions the Krithax could not reach. Within 4 minutes, the patrol was eliminated. Within 5, the resistance cell had vanished into tunnels beneath the city, leaving no trace except bodies and confusion. This was the new pattern. Humans did not fight Krithax's strength directly. They exploited the enemy's fundamental weakness. The Krithax walked into obvious traps because they could not feel the primal warning that danger was near. They pursued fleeing humans into enclosed spaces because they lacked the instinct that screamed ambush. They ignored tactical red flags that any species with functional fear responses would recognize instantly. Humans were not winning through superior firepower. They were winning through the weaponization of the Krithax's inability to be afraid. On the flagship orbiting Earth, Vex reviewed the same pattern repeating across every occupied zone. Krithax casualties were not declining. They were accelerating. Standard suppression tactics that worked on every other species were failing against humans because humans were not fighting a conventional resistance. They were conducting psychological warfare against an enemy that should have been immune to it. "Explain this," Vex demanded, showing his officers footage from Mumbai. The recording showed a Krithax patrol entering an abandoned school building. Human intelligence had indicated resistance. Fighters were using it as a base. The patrol swept through empty classrooms, finding nothing. Then children's laughter began playing from hidden speakers. Not threatening, just laughter, echoing through hallways. The patrol followed the sound. Searching for its source, they found a room filled with children's drawings on the walls. Crayon pictures of monsters, of darkness, of fear made visible through childhood imagination. In the center of the room sat a single chair with a note in English. "You cannot feel what we feel. That is why you lose." The patrol stepped forward to retrieve the note. The explosives, hidden beneath the floor, killed them all. "There is no military value to these tactics," Drex said, his voice frustrated in the flat way Krithax expressed confusion. "The psychological component is wasted on us. We do not experience fear. Yet, They continue using these methods. Because they work, Vex replied quietly. He had been studying human culture extensively for the past month, trying to understand what drove their tactical decisions. What he discovered troubled his calculations in ways he could not fully articulate. Humans had evolved with fear. Their entire civilization was built around it. They created art about fear. They told stories about it. They made films and books and games designed specifically to trigger fear responses for entertainment. They had studied fear so extensively that they understood it better than any species in the galaxy. And that understanding had taught them something the Krithax had never considered. Fear was not just an emotion to be felt. It was information to be used. When humans felt afraid, they became cautious, creative, unpredictable. They imagined threats that did not exist, which made them prepared for threats that did. They saw patterns in chaos. They anticipated ambushes. They trusted instincts that had kept their ancestors alive for millions of years. The Krithax had none of that. They calculated risk mathematically, but mathematics could not account for human imagination. They analyzed tactical situations logically, but logic failed when facing an enemy whose plans were driven by emotional responses the Krithax could not model. "Show me the cultural database on human fear," Vex ordered. What appeared on the displays was staggering. Humanity had a word for pleasure derived from fear. Thrill. They had entertainment industries worth billions built around triggering fear safely. They had psychological studies examining every aspect of fear's effects on behavior, decision-making, and survival. They had turned their greatest weakness into their most studied strength. Vex watched clips from human horror films. Creatures designed to terrify. Situations crafted to create dread. Humans paid money to experience fear in controlled environments, training themselves to function despite it, learning to master the emotion rather than be mastered by it. The Krithax had dismissed fear as weakness. Humans had transformed it into wisdom. "Commander, another patrol lost in London," an officer reported. Same pattern. Audio harassment, followed by trap deployment. Vex pulled up the tactical map. Red marks indicated Krithax casualties across every occupied city. The pattern was undeniable. Krithax forces were being destroyed not by superior weapons, but by an enemy that understood something fundamental about survival that his species had evolved past. In Lagos, a Krithax soldier named Thorax moved through dark streets with his unit, searching for resistance fighters. Their sensors showed movement ahead, heat signatures in an abandoned apartment complex. Standard procedure was to advance and neutralize. They did. The apartment was empty except for a single human child, perhaps 7 years old, sitting calmly in the center of a room. The child looked up at Thorax with eyes that showed no fear, only curiosity. That should have been impossible. Human children were documented to possess strong fear responses, especially to armed threats. "Why are you here?" Thorax asked, through his translator. The child smiled. Not a frightened smile, but something else. "My mom told me to tell you something. She said you can't feel scared. She said that's what makes this fun." "What makes what fun?" Thorax asked, but the child just laughed and pointed to the walls. The room was covered in drawings. Crayon pictures of monsters with too many teeth, of shadows with eyes, of things from human nightmares. Thorax studied them with cold analysis. They were meant to frighten. They accomplished nothing against him. "We are not afraid of pictures," Thorax said. "I know," the child replied. "But you should be afraid of what they mean." The building exploded. Not the room where Thorax stood, but every room around it. Shaped charges designed to bring down the structure in a controlled collapse. Thorax and his unit were buried in rubble. Most survived, trapped, and damaged but alive. It took 3 hours to dig them out. When they emerged, the child was gone. So were the resistance fighters, who had been hiding in the building next door, while the Krithax focused on an empty apartment and a child's drawings. Thorax reported the encounter to his commanders. He could not explain why the child had been unafraid. He could not explain why humans wasted resources on psychological tactics that should not work. He could only report what happened. Vex read the report and added it to thousands of others like it. Across Earth, the pattern was consistent. Humans were not fighting a military campaign. They were conducting an experiment to answer a single question. How do you defeat an enemy that feels no fear? The answer was appearing in the casualty statistics. You trap them. You trick them. You exploit their inability to feel danger's warning. You turn their fearlessness from strength into fatal weakness. Vex stared at Earth rotating on the view screen. City lights flickering through clouds. 8 billion humans conducting warfare his species had no doctrine to counter. For the first time in Krithak's history, a supreme commander calculated that victory might not be mathematically certain. He could not feel fear at that thought. But he recognized, with cold, logical precision, that humanity had taught him something new. The absence of fear was not strength. It was blindness to the lessons fear taught. 6 months into the occupation, humanity launched Operation Nightmare. Ambassador Minji Park stood in an underground command center beneath the ruins of Geneva, surrounded by resistance leaders from every continent. The room hummed with activity as coordinators managed operations across the planet. On the screens surrounding them, the war map showed something the Krithaks would not understand even if they saw it. Humanity was not trying to win militarily anymore. They were trying to teach. All teams are in position, Jae-sung reported from Seoul, his image appearing on the communication screen. Strike packages, ready for deployment. Minji studied the faces looking back at her from dozens of locations. These people had lost homes, families, entire cities to Krithak's occupation. They had every reason to want revenge, to kill as many invaders as possible. But that was not what Operation Nightmare was designed to do. Remember the objective, Minji said calmly. We are not trying to make them afraid. We cannot. But we can make them understand what they are missing. We can show them why fear is not weakness. It is wisdom. She nodded to the tactical coordinator. Begin, Phase 1. Across Earth, resistance cells activated simultaneously. But the attacks were unlike anything the Krithaks had faced before. They were not ambushes, or traps, or explosions. They were surgical strikes on something far more valuable than soldiers. Krithak's commanders began disappearing. In Cairo, Regional Commander Drax left his headquarters for a routine inspection. He never arrived at his destination. His escort was found hours later, unconscious but alive, with no memory of what happened. Drax was simply gone. No body, no ransom demand, no explanation. Just absence where certainty should be. In Beijing, Strategic Coordinator Vrel vanished from a secure compound. Security footage showed nothing unusual. One moment he was in his quarters. The next, the room was empty. His communication devices remained. His weapons remained. Vrel did not. In Sydney, Supply Officer Thenex disappeared while reviewing inventory in a locked warehouse. The doors never opened. The windows were sealed. Yet when his staff entered an hour later, he was gone. In his place was a note in English. Where did he go? You cannot fear, so you cannot guess. Supreme Commander Vex watched reports flood in from occupied territories across the planet. 23 Krithak's commanders missing in 12 hours. No bodies recovered. No evidence of struggle. The humans had taken them and left only questions. For a species that felt no fear, the disappearances should have meant nothing except logistical complications. Replace the commanders, continue operations, solve the mystery through analysis. But something else was happening. Something Vex had not anticipated. His soldiers were making mistakes. A patrol in Moscow reported seeing movement in an abandoned building. Standard procedure was to investigate. But the patrol hesitated. They had seen footage of other patrols investigating similar situations and walking into traps. They could not feel fear of what might be waiting inside, but they could calculate probability. They requested backup before entering. That hesitation saved them. The building was rigged with explosives, but the delay allowed engineers to detect the charges and neutralize them. The patrol survived not because they were afraid, but because they had learned to simulate caution even without the emotional trigger that normally caused it. Humans had made the Krythax start thinking like prey. In Mumbai, Jae-sung's team executed Phase 2 of Operation Nightmare. They infiltrated a Krythax command ship that had landed for resupply operations. The security was tight, but humans had learned how to move through Krythax surveillance networks by exploiting blind spots in sensors designed to detect threats. Not careful infiltration. The team did not sabotage the ship. They did not plant explosives or steal intelligence. They did something stranger. They left evidence. A Krythax officer's personal quarters now contained an impossible object. A music box that should not exist on the ship, playing a human lullaby when opened. In the medical bay, supplies were rearranged in patterns that spelled out words in English. In the armory, a single bullet was placed on every weapon, positioned identically, requiring hours of precise work. When Krythax personnel discovered these changes, they could not explain how humans had accessed the ship without triggering alarms. They could not explain why intruders would waste time rearranging objects instead of causing damage. They could not explain the purpose behind any of it. That was exactly the point. Humans were not trying to hurt the Krythax anymore. They were trying to make them doubt their own perceptions. They were introducing uncertainty into a species that relied entirely on logical certainty for decision-making. Vex studied the reports with growing concern. Not fear, which he could not feel, but mathematical recognition that Krythax tactical doctrine was breaking down. His forces were requesting backup for routine operations. They were spending extra time verifying secure areas. They were double-checking sensor readings that should be trusted automatically. They were acting as if they feared ambush, even though they could not feel fear. Humans had taught them that caution was logical, even without emotional motivation. In Lagos, Krythax soldier Thorax sat in his barracks, reviewing footage from his most recent patrol. The unit had swept through an abandoned residential district without incident. No resistance. No traps. No humans at all. Yet something in the recording bothered his tactical processor. Children's toys were scattered in the streets. Fresh toys, not weathered by months of abandonment. A ball. A stuffed animal. Small shoes, in a neat row outside a house. The arrangement was too deliberate to be coincidence. But what did it mean? Thorax ran probability calculations. The toys could mark hidden explosives. They could indicate occupied buildings. They could be bait for ambush. Or they could mean nothing at all, placed there specifically to make Krythax forces waste time analyzing meaningless patterns. That was the problem. Thorax could not tell which explanation was correct. Without fear to trigger intuitive threat assessment, he could only calculate possibilities, and humans were creating situations where too many possibilities existed. "You are overthinking," his squad leader said. "They are objects. They do not threaten us." But 3 hours later, another patrol found similar toys arranged in a different district. And then, another. And another. The pattern spread across Lagos, and with it spread something new among Krythax forces. Not fear, but awareness that humans were communicating something through these arrangements, and the Krythax could not decode the message. Phase 3 of Operation Nightmare intensified the psychological campaign. Human resistance began planting evidence of impossible things throughout occupied zones. Security footage appeared showing Krythax commanders in locations they had never visited. Communication logs contained messages no one remembered sending. Supply inventories showed equipment appearing and disappearing with no explanation. None of it was real. All of it was fabricated by human technical specialists who had learned to compromise Krythax data systems. But the effect was real. Krythax forces began questioning their own records, their own surveillance, their own chain of command. Humans were making the Krythax doubt reality itself. In New York, Minji received a report that made her pause. A Krithax patrol had encountered a human civilian in the street. The civilian was a young woman named Sarah Kim, a volunteer who had agreed to play a specific role. She stood calmly as the Krithax soldiers approached, showing no fear, making no attempt to flee. "Why are you here?" the patrol leader asked. "To give you a message," Sarah replied. "You have been on Earth for 6 months. You control our cities. Your ships orbit our planet. By every military measure, you have won. But you are losing more soldiers every day. Do you know why?" The Krithax did not answer. Sarah continued. "Because you cannot feel what we feel. You think that makes you strong. It makes you blind. You walk into traps because you cannot sense danger. You make mistakes because you cannot imagine consequences. You trust systems we have learned to compromise because you cannot fear deception. Fear is weakness," the patrol leader stated. "It causes panic and poor decisions." Sarah smiled sadly. "Fear is information. It is millions of years of evolution teaching us what is dangerous. You removed that from your species, and now you pay the price. Every day, every lost soldier, every failed operation. You are learning what we have always known. Fear is not the enemy of success. Certainty is. Fear. Actoth. 10. The patrol leader moved to detain Sarah, but she had already activated a device that generated an electromagnetic pulse. Nothing explosive, nothing lethal, just enough to disable Krithax communications for 30 seconds. By the time systems rebooted, Sarah had vanished into underground tunnels, and the patrol was left with her words echoing in their audio logs. Vex listened to that recording 17 times. The human woman had articulated something he had been struggling to calculate for months. The Krithax had removed fear from their biology because they viewed it as inefficient, but they had never considered what they lost along with it. Fear was not just emotion. It was processed information about survival, compressed into instant recognition of threat patterns. Without it, the Krithax were fighting with incomplete data. Across the Galactic Council networks, other species were watching the Earth situation with intense interest. The fearless Krithax Dominion, conqueror of 1,000 worlds, was failing to pacify a single planet of primitive humans. The military analysts could not explain it. How could a species with inferior technology and no special advantages resist this long? The answer was spreading through classified channels. Humans were not resisting through strength. They were exposing the fundamental flaw in Krithax psychology. An enemy that felt no fear could not properly assess danger. They could calculate it mathematically, but calculation was too slow, too logical, too vulnerable to manipulation. Fear was fast. Fear was intuitive. Fear had kept species alive for billions of years because it worked. The Krithax had declared themselves beyond fear. Humanity was teaching them the cost of that declaration. Vex stared at Earth on his view screen, watching lights flicker across the night side, seeing patterns in the illumination that might mean something or might mean nothing. For the first time in his military career, he calculated that withdrawal might be necessary, not because the Krithax were losing militarily, but because humans had found a way to fight that his species had no counter for. They had weaponized the very thing they felt, and the Krithax did not. They had turned fear from vulnerability into tactical advantage, and in doing so, they had revealed a truth the galaxy was only beginning to understand. The fearless were not invincible. They were merely unprepared for enemies who had mastered what the fearless had abandoned. The neutral station orbited empty space between Krithax territory and Earth's solar system. It had been built centuries ago as a meeting ground for species that did not trust each other enough to visit home systems. Today it served as the location for something unprecedented in Krithax history: peace negotiations. Supreme Commander Vex stood in the station's central chamber, waiting. His officers had questioned his decision to request this meeting. The Krithax did not negotiate. They conquered or they withdrew after calculating victory was impossible. But this situation was neither conquest nor withdrawal. It was something his species had no category for. The door opened. Ambassador Minji Park entered, followed by Captain Jae Sung Choi and 3 human military advisors. They wore formal diplomatic attire rather than combat gear. Minji's expression was calm and professional. Jae Sung studied Vex, with the careful attention of someone who had spent months fighting Krithak's forces and survived. "Commander Vex," Minji said, inclining her head slightly in greeting. "I did not agree," Vex replied. "I requested this meeting. There is a difference." Minji's lips quirked in what might have been a smile. They moved to a conference table designed for diplomatic exchanges. No weapons were allowed in the chamber. Not that it mattered. If either side wanted violence, the station had emergency protocols to prevent it. This meeting would be decided by words and calculations, not force. Vex spoke first, his voice carrying the flat precision his species used for important declarations. "I have calculated that the Krithaks cannot achieve conquest of Earth within acceptable casualty parameters. Our forces control major population centers, but human resistance has not decreased. Our losses continue to accelerate. Standard pacification protocols have failed." "Standard protocols work on species that feel fear," Jae Sung said quietly. "You built your entire military doctrine around enemies that can be intimidated. We cannot be intimidated because we have lived with fear our entire evolution. We know it. We use it. We are not afraid of you because we are afraid of so many other things that we learned how to function despite it." Vex nodded slowly. Over 6 months of combat, he had reached similar conclusions through mathematical analysis, but hearing it stated so simply by a human who had personally killed dozens of Krithak soldiers gave the words different weight. "Explain your strategic objective," Vex said. "You cannot defeat Krithak's military forces through direct combat. Your technology is inferior. Your numbers are insufficient. Yet you continue fighting. What calculation supports this decision?" Minji folded her hands on the table, meeting Vex's eyes directly. "We were never trying to defeat you militarily. We were trying to make you understand something about yourselves, about what you lost when you removed fear from your biology." She pulled up a holographic display showing casualty statistics from the past 6 months. Krithak's losses formed a rising curve that never flattened. Human losses were higher in absolute numbers, but lower as a percentage of forces engaged. The mathematical trend was clear. Given enough time, the Krithaks would lose through attrition. "Fear is not weakness, Commander. It is information. When our ancestors walked through forests filled with predators, fear kept them alive. It made them cautious, creative, unpredictable. It forced them to think 3 steps ahead because the alternative was death. You evolved past fear because your homeworld was not dangerous. You had no predators, no survival pressure that required emotional threat assessment. So you optimized fear away and called it strength." Minji leaned forward slightly. "But fear is not optimization. It is wisdom compressed into instinct. When we feel afraid, we do not just calculate risk. We imagine possibilities. We see patterns that logic misses. We trust gut feelings that have been refined by millions of years of ancestors who survived because their fear told them the truth. You have none of that. You can only calculate. And calculation is too slow when fighting humans." Vex processed her words, comparing them against his own analysis. The conclusion was mathematically sound. The Krithaks' tactical advantage had always been their inability to be frightened by enemy threats. But against humans, that advantage became a critical vulnerability. Humans used fear-based tactics not to frighten the Krithaks, but to exploit their lack of fear's protective benefits. "You trapped us because we could not sense danger," Vex said. "You confused us because we could not imagine deception. You made us doubt our systems because we lacked intuition to verify what our sensors reported." Yes," Jae Sung confirmed. "Every trap we set relied on you walking into obvious danger because you could not feel the warning signs. Every psychological operation worked because you wasted resources, analyzing things that our instincts would dismiss immediately. Every infiltration succeeded because you trusted your security systems instead of trusting the feeling that something was wrong. The human captain pulled up footage from various resistance operations. Krithax patrols, walking into ambushes. Soldiers investigating suspicious situations without caution. Officers trusting compromised data because they had no emotional warning that it might be false. Every clip demonstrated the same principle. The absence of fear made the Krithax predictable and vulnerable. We studied your previous conquests, Minji continued. Every species you defeated was governed by fear. They saw your soldiers advance without hesitation, and their fear response triggered panic. They broke and ran. But we did not run. We have been running from fear our entire existence. We learned long ago that fear can be a tool, not just an emotion. You walked into a civilization that had mastered what you had abandoned. Vex was silent for a long moment, processing implications that spread beyond the Earth campaign. If humans could exploit Krithax fearlessness this effectively, other species could learn the same tactics. The Dominion's military doctrine, perfected over thousands of successful conquests, had been revealed as fundamentally flawed. They were not invincible. They were simply lucky that previous enemies had not understood how to fight them. "What are your terms for ending hostilities?" Vex asked. "Full withdrawal from Earth," Minji stated. "Within 30 days. Complete evacuation of all Krithax forces and occupation infrastructure." Vex calculated the political cost. Withdrawal would be seen as defeat. The Galactic Council would interpret it as weakness. Other occupied species might rebel, believing the Krithax could be beaten. But the alternative was worse. Continued occupation would mean continued casualties, continued resource drain, and continued demonstration to the galaxy that humanity had found the Krithax weak point. Better to withdraw and reframe the narrative as strategic repositioning than stay and prove through mounting losses that the fearless could be defeated. "Agreed," Vex said. "We will begin withdrawal immediately. But I have conditions." "We are listening," Minji replied. "The galaxy is watching this conflict. They will draw conclusions about Krithax military capability based on our withdrawal. I want Earth to make a statement that explains why this campaign failed. Not propaganda. Truth. I want other species to understand what happened here." Jae-sung frowned. "You want us to explain your weakness to potential enemies? I want you to explain that our weakness is specific to enemies like humanity. Species that have mastered fear rather than being controlled by it. Most civilizations in this galaxy are not like you. They panic. They break. They surrender when faced with fearless enemies. Your tactics will not work for them because they do not have your psychological framework." Minji studied Vex carefully. "You are trying to minimize the damage to your reputation. I am trying to prevent unnecessary conflicts." Vex corrected. "If every species believes they can defeat Krithax forces using human tactics, they will try. They will fail because they cannot execute those tactics effectively. Many will die needlessly. Better to make clear that humanity is exceptional in this regard." There was logic in the argument, though Minji suspected it was also strategic calculation to protect Krithax interests. But the outcome was acceptable. Humanity did not want to be responsible for encouraging hopeless rebellions across the galaxy. "We have a counter-proposal," Minji said. "You withdraw from Earth and 47 other occupied worlds. The species on those worlds deserve freedom as much as we do. In exchange, Earth will enter into formal diplomatic relations with the Krithax Dominion. We will share our research on fear, psychology, and tactical applications. We will help you understand what you lost and why it matters." Vex calculated quickly. 47 worlds represented significant territory, but they were becoming increasingly costly to occupy as news of the Earth resistance spread. Other occupied species were already showing signs of organizing similar campaigns. Withdrawing now, before those resistances became unmanageable, would minimize losses. and gaining access to human psychological research would provide strategic value. Understanding fear might allow the Krithax to simulate its benefits through training and doctrine, even if they could not feel it biologically. Acceptable, Vex agreed. We will withdraw from the specified worlds over the next 90 days. Earth will provide civilian advisors to assist with Krithax tactical development. They formalized the terms over the next hour, working through details with the precision of two civilizations that understood the importance of clear agreements. When they finished, Minji stood and extended her hand in the human gesture of agreement. Vex studied the hand for a moment, then grasped it carefully. The physical contact felt strange but appropriate. I have one question, Vex said. Personal curiosity, not tactical inquiry. During our occupation, we captured very few humans alive. Most resistance fighters died rather than surrender. They knew we would not harm prisoners, yet they chose death. Why? Jae-sung answered. Because we were afraid of what you represent, Commander. An existence without fear sounds like strength, but to us it looks like something worse. A universe where nothing matters enough to be afraid of losing it. Where survival is just calculation, instead of desperate, beautiful struggle. We fought so hard because we were afraid of becoming like you, empty of the thing that makes life precious. The words should have meant nothing to Vex. He could not feel the emotion Jae-sung described. But he understood the mathematics behind it. Humans fought harder because they had something to lose that they valued more than their own lives. The Krithax had nothing like that. They existed. They conquered. They calculated. But they did not treasure existence the way humans did. Perhaps that was the truest cost of fearlessness. Not vulnerability to certain tactics, but the loss of whatever made life worth fighting for, beyond simple persistence. 3 weeks later, the last Krithax transport left Earth's orbit. Cities that had been occupied began the slow work of rebuilding. Resistance fighters like Jae-sung transitioned to peacetime roles, though they kept their weapons close and their networks active. Trust would take generations to build. In orbit, Vex watched Earth recede on his viewscreen one final time. He had been sent to conquer a primitive world and return within weeks. Instead, he was withdrawing after months of escalating casualties, having been defeated not by superior technology, but by superior understanding of something his species considered weakness. On Earth, Minji stood among the ruins of Geneva, watching Krithax ships vanish into jump space. Around her, humans celebrated victory. But she knew this was not truly victory. It was a lesson delivered and received. Humanity had taught the galaxy something about the nature of fear and the cost of abandoning it. Years later, at the Krithax Military Academy, new commanders studied the Earth campaign as a cautionary lesson. They learned about human tactics. They studied fear psychology. They practiced simulation techniques designed to mimic cautious decision-making even without emotional motivation. And in one particular classroom, Thorax, now an instructor, showed footage of a human child sitting calmly in a room full of drawings. He paused the recording and addressed his students. This child was not afraid of us. Not because humans are fearless, but because they are so familiar with fear that they can choose when to feel it and when to set it aside. We cannot feel fear at all. We thought that made us superior. We were wrong. The humans did not make us afraid. They could not. But they showed us that our inability to fear made us vulnerable to those who had mastered it. He resumed the recording, showing the child's words. You can't feel scared. That's what makes this fun. Remember those words, Thorax told his students. The human was not taunting us. She was teaching us. In a universe where most species are governed by fear, the species that understand it best are the most dangerous. Not because they lack fear, but because they have learned to use it as the weapon it truly is. The lesson ended. The students filed out, processing information that would reshape Krithax military doctrine for generations. Somewhere in the records, Earth was marked with a special designation. Not conquered. Not enemy. Something else. Entirely. Humanity. The species that taught the fearless to understand fear. The sky above Seoul turned purple without warning. Captain Min Jun Park looked up from his morning coffee and watched as massive shapes pushed through the clouds. They were ships, bigger than anything humanity had ever built. So big that they blocked out the sun over half the city. Min Jun ran to his communication panel. His hands moved fast across the controls. Around the world, every screen flickered and showed the same image. Giant figures appeared in the sky. They looked like humans but perfect. Too perfect. Their eyes glowed with white light. Their voices came from everywhere at once. "People of Earth," the voice said. It spoke every language at the same time. "We are the Velkari. We are your creators. We are your gods. We seeded life on your world 10,000 years ago. Now we have returned to claim what is ours. You will worship us. You will serve us. This is your purpose." Min Jun felt his stomach turn. He had heard words like this before. When he was a child, his parents joined a cult. The leaders claimed they spoke to gods. They promised salvation. They took everything his parents had. Then, they took his parents' lives. Min Jun learned early that anyone who claimed to be a god was either a liar or a fool. He pressed the emergency button. Within seconds, he connected to the Earth Defense Fleet Command Center. General Martinez appeared on the screen. Her face was tight with worry. "Captain Park, get to your ship now," she said. "All fleet officers are being recalled. This is not a drill." Min Jun grabbed his uniform jacket and ran. Outside, people stood in the streets. They stared up at the sky with open mouths. Some were crying. Others were on their knees. The massive holographic figures walked through the clouds like giants. They pointed down at cities. They spoke of ancient times and divine plans. At the spaceport, Min Jun found his crew already preparing the EDF Indomitable for launch. Lieutenant Sarah Chen met him at the airlock. Her face was pale, but her eyes were angry. "Sir, are you seeing this?" she asked. "They're calling themselves gods." "I see it," Min Jun said. "Get us in orbit. I want a close look at these so-called gods." The Indomitable lifted off with 50 other Earth ships. They climbed through the atmosphere and into space. What they saw made everyone go quiet. The Velkari fleet filled the space above Earth. Hundreds of ships hung in perfect formation. Each one was shaped like a crystal cathedral. Light poured from them in waves. Beautiful. Terrifying. But Min Jun looked closer. He told his scanner officer to analyze the light patterns. After 10 minutes, the officer turned around with a confused look. "Captain, the light shows are just holograms," he said. "Very advanced ones. But still holograms. And the ships follow normal physics. They use engines. They have heat signatures. Nothing about them breaks the laws of nature." Min Jun smiled. Not a happy smile. A smile that said he knew he was right. They're not gods. They're just aliens, with good, special effects. On Earth, the world leaders gathered in emergency sessions. The Velkari message played again and again. They demanded that humanity build temples. They wanted offerings of resources. They wanted humans to bow down and accept their rule. They gave humanity 1 full day to respond. In the United Earth Government Chamber, the debate was fierce. Some leaders wanted to submit. They said the Velkari were too powerful to fight. Others wanted to negotiate. They hoped to find a peaceful solution. But a growing number wanted to refuse. Ambassador Okonkwo from the African Union stood up. "My ancestors were told they were less than human. They were told to bow to masters who claimed superiority. They refused. They fought. They won their freedom. I will not dishonor their memory by kneeling to anyone who demands worship." The vote took 3 hours. In the end, the decision was clear. Earth would not submit without proof. Real proof. Not light shows and pretty words. High Celestial Zarthun received Earth's response aboard his flagship. He read the message 3 times. His face showed complete confusion. In 3,000 years of service, across 47 worlds, no one had ever questioned his divinity. Every species had accepted the Velkhari as gods within days. Most within hours. They want proof? He said to his second officer. We appeared in their sky. We demonstrated our power. We spoke to their entire world at once. What more proof do they need? Proof. His officer looked uncomfortable. The humans have sent detailed questions, High Celestial. They ask how we created them. They want genetic evidence. They request historical records. They have analyzed our ships and claim we use technology, not divine power. Zarthun felt something he had not felt in centuries. Anger. Pure. Hot. Anger. These primitive beings dared to question him. They dared to analyze his sacred fleet, like it was a common machine. He opened a channel to Earth. His face appeared on every screen again. This time, he did not look kind. He looked cold. Humanity, he said. You have one cycle to reconsider. Build your temples. Prepare your offerings. Accept your place in the divine order, or you will learn why gods are meant to be feared. We have destroyed worlds before. We can destroy yours. Choose wisely. The transmission ended. Zarthun sat back in his throne. He felt certain the humans would submit now. They always did, after the first threat. On the Indomitable, Minjun watched the transmission with his crew. When it ended, Sarah turned to him. They threatened to destroy our world, she said. Yes, Minjun replied. They did. What do we do? Minjun looked at the Velkhari fleet hanging above Earth like a sword. He thought about his parents. He thought about every lie he had ever been told. He thought about every bully who tried to make others bow through fear. We get ready to fight, he said. Because I've learned something important in my life. Real gods don't need to threaten people. Real gods don't need to prove they're gods. And anyone who demands worship is someone who doesn't deserve it. Around Earth, the military began to move. Ships launched from every spaceport. Weapons were loaded. Soldiers suited up. The government sent out one more message to the Velkhari. We do not bow to anyone. Prove your claims, or leave our system in peace. In the sky above Earth, the Velkhari ships began to glow brighter. They prepared their weapons. War was coming, and for the first time in their long history, the Velkhari would face an enemy who refused to be afraid of gods. Earth did not sleep. While the Velkhari deadline counted down, scientists worked in labs around the world. They studied every second of the alien broadcasts. Historians searched through old records. Religious scholars compared the Velkhari claims to ancient texts. Everyone looked for the same thing: proof. Any proof that these aliens had created humanity. They found nothing. Dr. Rebecca Walsh led the genetic research team in Geneva. She ran DNA tests for 30 hours straight. Her eyes were red from staring at screens. When she finished, she called the United Earth government with her report. There is no alien DNA in humans, she said. Our evolution is completely natural. Every fossil, every genetic marker, everything points to us developing right here on Earth. If the Velkhari created us, they left no trace. Similar reports came from every research center. The Velkhari story had holes everywhere. They claimed to have seeded Earth 10,000 years ago. But human civilization went back further than that. They claimed to have guided human development. But they could not name a single specific event they had influenced. Their knowledge of Earth was shallow, like someone who had read a basic report but never actually been there. Captain Minjun Park received new orders on the second day. General Martinez appeared on his screen, looking tired, but determined. Captain, we need close-up intelligence on those ships, she said. Take a stealth team. Get close enough to scan them properly. Find out what we're really dealing with. Min Jun chose 5 small ships for the mission. Each one used experimental stealth technology. They would be nearly invisible to sensors. Nearly. If the Velkari were really gods, they would see through the stealth easily. If they were just advanced aliens, the ships might work. The team launched at night. They drifted toward the Velkari fleet on minimum power. No active sensors. No communications. Just silent watching. Min Jun piloted his ship himself. His hands were steady on the controls. He had done this before. Not with aliens, but with people who used fear and lies to control others. When he was 12, Min Jun had sneaked into the cult compound to find his parents. He watched the leaders from hiding. He saw how they used simple tricks to seem powerful. Smoke machines, hidden speakers, prepared answers to common questions. When his parents died, Min Jun promised himself he would never let lies go unchallenged again. The stealth ships reached the Velkari fleet. Min Jun activated passive scanners. The data that came back was fascinating. The Velkari ships were incredibly advanced. Their technology was centuries ahead of Earth's. But it was still technology. Reactors, engines, computers. Everything followed the rules of physics. Lieutenant Chen's voice came through on tight beam communication. "Captain, I'm picking up something interesting. The holographic projectors are separate systems. If those get damaged, the light shows stop working." Another pilot reported on the weapons. "Sir, their main guns use concentrated energy. Powerful, but they need time to charge. And they generate a lot of heat before firing." Min Jun recorded everything. After 6 hours, they had a complete picture. The Velkari were dangerous. They were advanced. But they were not gods. They were just very old aliens with very good technology. On the way back, Min Jun's communications officer picked up a strange signal. It was encrypted but weak, like it was not meant to be found. The officer worked on it for an hour and finally broke the code. "Captain, you need to hear this," she said. The recording played. It was a Velkari voice speaking their own language. The computer translated it. Updating Conquest Database. Species 47. The Rithani. Submitted after Standard Divine Manifestation Protocol. Initial resistance lasted only 4 hours. They are now building temples as required. Total casualties. Minimal. The key was threatening their children. They folded immediately. Min Jun felt sick. Then the recording continued. Species 48, humanity, is not responding to standard protocol. High Celestial Zarthun is confused. Recommend we review archives for similar cases of resistance. The officer looked at Min Jun. "Sir, there are hundreds of these recordings. They've done this before. Many times. It's a script. They arrive, claim to be gods, and species give up. But no one ever fought back," Min Jun said quietly. "No, sir. We're the first." Back on Earth, Min Jun delivered his report to the United Earth government. He showed them everything. The scans, the recordings, the truth about the Velkari's previous conquests. Ambassador Okonkwo stood up again. "So they're slavers. Liars who use fear to make species surrender without a fight." "That's exactly what they are," Min Jun confirmed. "Then we know what we have to do," she said. But not everyone agreed. Some leaders argued that even if the Velkari were not gods, they were still too powerful to fight. Their technology was too advanced. Earth would lose. General Martinez spoke up. "Maybe we lose. Maybe we all die. But I would rather die free than live as a slave to liars. My vote is to fight." The debate lasted through the night. While they argued, Earth's factories worked at full speed. Every shipyard built weapons. Every military base called up reserves. Evacuation plans moved civilians away from cities. Humanity prepared for war even before the decision was official. The deadline arrived. The Valkyrie broadcasted again. Zarthun's face appeared across Earth. He looked calm. Too calm. "Humanity," he said. "Your time is up." The United Earth government sent their response. Ambassador Okonkwo delivered it personally. "Valkyrie, we have studied your claims carefully. We find no evidence that you created us. We have analyzed your ships and found only technology, not divine power. We acknowledge you are advanced, but we do not acknowledge you as gods. Leave our system in peace, or stay as friends and equals. But we will not bow to you. Not now. Not ever." The transmission ended. For a long moment, there was silence. On the Valkyrie flagship, Zarthun stared at the screen. His face showed no emotion. Then, slowly, he began to laugh. It was not a happy laugh. It was the laugh of someone who had been insulted and planned revenge. "They dare," he whispered. "They actually dare to refuse me." He turned to his weapons officer. "Target their moon base. The one with 3,000 personnel. Destroy it completely. Let them watch their people die. Let them understand the price of defying gods." On Earth, alarms blared. Military sensors detected the Valkyrie ships charging weapons. The target was clear. Luna Base, the moon colony where 3,000 people lived and worked. Min Jun was at Fleet Command when the alert came. He grabbed General Martinez's arm. "Can we stop it?" She looked at him with sad eyes. "Not in time. They're too far away. Too powerful." They watched on screens as the Valkyrie fired. A beam of pure energy crossed space in seconds. It hit Luna Base directly. The base simply vanished, turned to dust and debris. 3,000 people died instantly. Earth went silent. Every person who saw it felt the same shock, the same horror. Then, slowly, the shock turned to something else. Anger. Pure, burning anger. Min Jun felt it too. But his anger was cold, focused. He had seen bullies before. He knew what they did. They hurt someone weak to scare everyone else. They expected tears and surrender. They would not get it from humanity. General Martinez received 10,000 volunteers in the first hour. Every pilot wanted to fight. Every soldier wanted revenge. The United Earth government voted again. This time, there was no debate. The vote was unanimous. War. Min Jun walked to his ship. His crew was already there, preparing for launch. Sarah Chen looked at him with hard eyes. "We're going to make them pay, right, sir?" she asked. "Yes," Min Jun said. "We're going to show them what happens when you hurt humans. We're going to teach these fake gods that they bleed just like everyone else." Above Earth, the Valkyrie fleet waited. Zarthun expected surrender any moment. He had destroyed their moon base. Surely now they understood. Surely now they would bow. But Earth's response was not prayers. It was warships. Hundreds of them launched toward the Valkyrie fleet. Small compared to the alien vessels. Primitive compared to their technology. But coming fast and ready to fight, Zarthun watched them approach. For the first time in his long life, he felt something strange. A tiny seed of doubt. These humans were supposed to be afraid. Why were they attacking? He shook off the feeling. It did not matter. He would crush them. He would show them why the Valkyrie ruled the galaxy. He would prove that gods always won in the end. But he did not know humans. He did not understand what they were capable of when pushed too far. He did not realize that humanity had spent its entire history killing false gods. He was about to learn. The human fleet came in fast. 200 ships against the Valkyrie armada. Every captain knew the odds. Every crew understood they might die. Nobody cared. Luna Base was gone. 3,000 people were dead. That blood demanded an answer. Captain Min Jun Park led the attack. The Indomitable flew at the front of the formation. His crew worked their stations with cold efficiency. No one spoke unless necessary. They had a job to do. General Martinez's voice came through on command channel. All ships, listen up. We're not trying to win this battle. Not yet. We're trying to learn. We need to know how they fight, what their weaknesses are. Get in close. Hit them hard. Make them react. And record everything. The Velkari fleet moved to intercept. Their ships formed a wall of crystal and light. They looked beautiful. Peaceful, even. Then, they opened fire. The first volley destroyed 15 human ships instantly. Energy beams cut through armor like paper. Explosions lit up space. Min Jun watched friends die on his scanners. He felt his jaw tighten, but he kept flying forward. All ships, scatter pattern Delta, he commanded. Make them split their fire. The human fleet broke apart. Ships went in every direction. Some went up, some went down. Others rolled sideways and came around from different angles. The Velkari had to choose targets. They could not hit everything at once. Min Jun saw an opening. One of the Velkari cruisers had fired its main gun. The weapon was recharging. Heat poured from cooling vents on its side. He aimed his ship directly at those vents. All power to forward shields, he ordered. Chen, prepare the nuclear package. Sarah Chen looked at him. She understood what he was planning. It was crazy. It might work. She armed the warhead. The Indomitable dove toward the Velkari cruiser. Smaller weapons fired at them. Shields sparked and failed. Hull plates melted, but they kept going. At the last second, Min Jun rolled the ship and released the warhead directly into the cooling vents. Punch it, he shouted. The ship's engines fired at maximum. They barely cleared the blast radius. Behind them, the nuclear warhead went deep into the Velkari ship before exploding. The cruiser's hull split open. Internal explosions followed. The entire ship began to break apart. On the Velkari flagship, alarms blared. Zarthun stared at the tactical display. One of his cruisers was dying. A human ship had actually damaged a Velkari vessel. Impossible. These primitives with their crude weapons should not be able to hurt his fleet. How did they do that? He demanded. His tactical officer studied the recordings. High Celestial. They targeted our cooling systems during weapon recharge. They used a nuclear device at close range. The radiation and heat overwhelmed the internal shields. Zarthun felt anger rise. But also something else. Respect? No. These were not worthy of respect. They were insects. Dangerous insects. All ships, focus fire. Destroy the human fleet completely. No survivors. The Velkari changed tactics. They stopped trying to look impressive. They started trying to kill efficiently. Ship after ship died. The human fleet was being torn apart. But while they fought, Min Jun's cyber warfare team worked. They had one job: get into the Velkari network. Every second of battle, they tried to break through the alien firewalls. They failed again and again. Until they did not. A small data port on the damaged cruiser was still active. Its shields were down. The cyber team sent a worm program through the gap. It spread fast through the Velkari network. Not attacking, just copying. Downloading everything it could find. The data came back to the Indomitable in seconds. Min Jun's computer officer started reading through it. Her eyes went wide. See home. See. Captain. You need to see this. Right now. Min Jun looked at the screen while dodging fire. What he saw made him forget the battle for a moment. The file was labeled Divine Conquest Protocol. Historical Implementation Guide. It was an instruction manual. A step-by-step guide on how to make species think you were a god. What to say. How to appear. What threats worked best on different types of civilizations. It even had notes about which species had been easiest to fool. But there was more. much more. The file contained the Velkari's own history, and it was not what they claimed. 3,000 years ago, the Velkari had been slaves themselves. Another species had ruled them using the same tricks, claiming to be gods, demanding worship. The Velkari had suffered for centuries. Then, they rebelled. They killed their masters. They took their technology. And then they became exactly what they had hated. They used the same lies on other species. They convinced themselves it was their right, their destiny. They became the monsters that had once tortured them. Minjun read it all in seconds. Then he made a decision. Broadcast this on all frequencies, he said. Human frequencies, Velkari frequencies, everything. I want every species in their empire to see the truth. His communications officer hesitated. Sir, that will expose our position. Every Velkari ship will target us. I know, Minjun said. Do it anyway. The broadcast went out. Every ship in the battle received it. The Velkari history. Their lies. The proof that they were not gods. Just old aliens who learned that fear was easier than earning respect. On the flagship, Zarthun heard the broadcast. He watched as his own history played for everyone to see. His face went pale, then red, then white again. Find that ship, he whispered. Find it and destroy it. Now. 50 Velkari ships turned toward the Indomitable. Every weapon locked on. Minjun saw them coming. He opened his ship-wide channel. Crew, it's been an honor. If we die here, we die knowing we told the truth. And sometimes, that's enough. Sarah Chen smiled. Sir, request permission to say something inappropriate. Granted. Let's show these fake gods what real humans do. The Velkari fired. Every weapon at once. Enough energy to destroy a city. All aimed at one ship. But the Indomitable was not alone. 30 human ships moved between it and the fire. They took the hits meant for Minjun. They died so the truth could spread. Their shields collapsed. Their hulls melted. Their crews burned. But they bought time. The Indomitable survived. Barely. Half its systems were dead. The ship was leaking air. But it was still flying. And across space, the broadcast continued. It reached other species in the Velkari Empire. Species that had bowed to these false gods. Species that had served for generations. Now, they knew the truth. The gods were liars. The gods were former slaves. The gods were nothing special. On the Velkari homeworld, citizens watched the broadcast. Many had never known the true history. They had been taught they were chosen by destiny to rule. Now they learned their ancestors had been victims who became victimizers. The shame was overwhelming. Zarthun saw his empire beginning to crack. He saw doubt spread through his fleet. Some of his own officers looked at him differently now. Not with reverence, with questions. Retreat, he ordered. Fall back to defensive formation. We will regroup. The Velkari fleet pulled away. They stopped attacking. They moved into a protective sphere around the flagship. They looked scared. Minjun watched them go. His ship was dying. 70% of his crew was dead or wounded. But they had done what they came to do. They had proven the Velkari could bleed. They had shown the truth to the galaxy. General Martinez's voice came through on emergency frequency. Captain Park, fall back. You've done enough. Acknowledged, Minjun said. Indomitable is returning to Earth. The ship limped back toward home. Around it, the remains of the human fleet followed. They had lost 100 ships. 5,000 people were dead. But the Velkari had lost something more important. Their mystique, their divine image. Their power came from fear and lies. Now everyone knew it. On Earth, people watched the recordings. They saw the truth about the Velkari. They saw human ships sacrifice themselves to spread that truth. They saw that gods could be hurt. Gods could be frightened. Gods could run away. But Zarthun was not finished. In his command chamber, he contacted the Velkari homeworld. He requested the full fleet, not the conquest fleet, the extermination fleet. If humanity wanted to fight gods, he would show them what divine wrath really meant. He would burn Earth to ash. He would kill every human. He would erase them from history. Then, he would rebuild his image. He would restore the fear. But he did not understand something important. Humans had killed their own gods throughout history. Humans had fought empires larger than themselves. Humans had survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and disasters. They were survivors. And when pushed to the edge, they became something terrifying. The Velkari thought they were teaching humanity about divine power. They did not realize humanity was teaching them about mortal fury. The war was just beginning. And the false gods were about to learn that the most dangerous species in the galaxy was not the strongest or the smartest. It was the one that refused to stay on its knees. Minjun looked at his damaged ship, at his wounded crew, at Earth growing larger in the view screen. They had survived the first battle. But bigger fights were coming. The Velkari would be back. Angry, vengeful, good. Let them come. Humanity would be waiting. And this time, they would be ready to kill gods. 3 weeks passed. Earth rebuilt and prepared. Factories ran day and night. Every ship that could fly was armed and ready. Every weapon that could fire was loaded. Humanity knew the Velkari would return. The only question was when. The answer came on a Tuesday morning. Sensors detected massive energy signatures at the edge of the solar system. Then the Velkari fleet arrived. Not hundreds of ships this time. Thousands. The entire Velkari armada had come to Earth. They filled the space between Mars and Jupiter like a metal ocean. At the center of the fleet was the Divine Throne. The flagship. A ship bigger than a city. Zarthun commanded from there. He broadcast a message to Earth. His face appeared on every screen. He looked calm, cold, absolutely certain of victory. Humanity, he said. You have forced me to take extreme measures. You spread lies about us. You attacked our ships. You killed our people. For these crimes, your species will be exterminated. We will burn your world. We will erase every trace of your existence. And then we will restore order to the galaxy. This is not war. This is divine judgment. The transmission ended. The Velkari fleet began moving toward Earth. Slowly. They were in no hurry. They wanted humanity to feel fear, to understand how hopeless resistance was. In the Earth Defense Command Center, General Martinez looked at her officers. We're outnumbered 10-1. Their ships are better than ours. If we fight them directly, we lose. So we don't fight them directly. Captain Park, present your plan. Minjun stepped forward. He looked tired. The wounds from the last battle had healed, but left scars. His left arm moved stiffly, but his eyes were sharp and focused. We can't win by fighting their fleet, he said, but we can win by destroying their leadership. Zarthun commands from the Divine Throne. If we kill him and broadcast it like we did before, the Velkari fleet will fall apart. They're already shaken, already doubting. Take away their leader, and they break. An admiral shook his head. That ship is protected by hundreds of others. We'd never get close. We would if they were distracted, Minjun said. We split our forces. Most of our ships defend Earth. They make it look like a desperate last stand, while the Velkari focus on that. A strike team goes around the outside. Quiet. Fast. We hit the Divine Throne before they know we're there. General Martinez studied the tactical display. The plan was insane. It required perfect timing, perfect luck. One mistake, and everyone died. But it was the only plan that had any chance at all. Do it, she said. Captain Park, you'll lead the strike team. Choose your best people. Kill that bastard. Min Jun selected 20 ships. Small, fast, armed with every weapon Earth could provide. He chose pilots who had survived the first battle. People who knew how to fight Valkyrie ships. People who were willing to die to win. Sarah Chen volunteered immediately. So did the entire crew of the Indomitable. The ship had been repaired, but it still showed damage. Burns on the hull. Replaced armor plates that did not quite match. It looked like a warrior with scars. Perfect. The battle began when the Valkyrie reached Earth orbit. The human defense fleet rose to meet them. 300 ships against 3,000. The odds were terrible. But humans fought anyway. Ships died in the first minute. Then more. Then more. But they fought smart. They used the moon for cover. They hid in Earth's shadow. They made the Valkyrie work for every kill. And while the main fleet fought, Min Jun's strike team moved. They went dark. No active sensors. No communications. They drifted on minimal power around the edge of the battle. The Valkyrie sensors were focused on the main fight. They never saw 20 small ships moving through the chaos. It took 2 hours to reach the divine throne. 2 hours of watching friends die on passive sensors. 2 hours of staying quiet while Earth burned below. Min Jun watched it all. He felt each death like a knife. But he kept moving forward. The divine throne was massive up close. Kilometers long. Covered in weapons. Surrounded by shield generators. Getting inside would be impossible through normal means. So Min Jun did not use normal means. All ships, arm breaching charges, he ordered. We're going through the hull. The strike team accelerated. They came in from the blind spot, under the ship. The Valkyrie shields protected against energy weapons and missiles. But they were not designed to stop physical ramming. 20 ships hit the Divine Throne's hull at full speed. The impact was brutal. Half the strike team died instantly. Their ships crumpled against the alien armor. But the breaching charges worked. Explosions tore holes in the hull. 5 ships made it through. 5 ships entered the flagship. Inside was chaos. Valkyrie warriors scrambled to respond. They wore armor that glowed with energy. They carried weapons that fired bolts of plasma. They were bigger than humans, stronger, faster. But humans were angrier. Min Jun led his team through the corridors. They moved in tight formation, covering each other, shooting anything that moved. The Valkyrie fought back hard. Energy bolts filled the hallways. People died on both sides. Sarah Chen took a hit to the shoulder. She kept fighting. A young pilot named Kim lost his leg to an explosion. He crawled forward and threw grenades while his team moved past him. Everyone understood this was a one-way mission. Nobody expected to go home. They reached the command center after 30 minutes of fighting. The doors were massive, reinforced, locked. Min Jun placed every explosive they had left on the door. Then, they ran. The explosion was huge. It blew the doors inward and killed half of Min Jun's remaining team. But it opened the way. Min Jun and Sarah charged through the smoke into the command center. Zarthon stood at the center. His command throne was made of crystal and gold. It looked like something from a temple. He wore robes that shimmered with light. His eyes glowed. He looked every bit the god he claimed to be. "You dare enter my sanctum?" he said. His voice echoed with power. "You dare approach divinity itself?" Min Jun raised his rifle. "You're not divine. You're just old and scared and desperate to feel important." Zarthun's face twisted with rage. He waved his hand and the lights went crazy. Holographic monsters appeared from nowhere. They roared and charged. The walls seemed to close in. Reality itself appeared to bend. Sarah nearly fell back in fear. The monsters looked so real, so terrifying. But Min Jun walked forward calmly. He had seen this before. Different place, different fake gods, same tricks. He shot the holographic projectors, one by one. The monsters disappeared. The walls returned to normal. Reality stabilized. Zarthun stood there, looking suddenly smaller, more afraid. "You're just a liar with good technology," Minjun said. "I've killed people like you before." Zarthun grabbed a weapon, an energy blade that hummed with power. He moved fast, faster than a human should be able to block. The blade came down toward Minjun's head. Sarah shot him 3 times in the chest. Zarthun stumbled back. His armor sparked but held. He was wounded but not dead. He swung again. This time he hit Sarah. She went down hard. Minjun dropped his rifle and pulled a knife. Not an energy weapon, not advanced technology, just a simple knife made of steel. He rushed forward, while Zarthun was off balance. The alien was bigger, stronger. But Minjun was desperate. They fought. It was ugly, brutal. No grace or honor, just 2 beings trying to kill each other. Zarthun's blade cut Minjun across the ribs. Minjun's knife found gaps in Zarthun's armor. They bled. They hurt. They kept fighting. "Why?" Zarthun gasped. "Why won't you bow? We are superior. We are ancient. We deserve to rule." "Why?" Minjun stabbed again. The knife went deep into Zarthun's side. "Deserving means earning. You just took. You just demanded. That's not superiority. That's cowardice." Zarthun fell to his knees. His armor failed. His weapons dropped. He looked up at Minjun with confusion and fear. Real fear. The fear of someone who knows they are about to die. "We were gods," he whispered. "No," Minjun said. "You were just people. And we've killed gods before. They were fake too." He drove the knife into Zarthun's throat. The High Celestial's eyes went wide, then empty. He fell forward, dead. Minjun activated his suit camera. He broadcast everything. The dead High Celestial. The broken holograms. The truth. He sent it on all frequencies to every ship in the system. "This is Captain Minjun Park of Earth," he said into the camera. "Your god is dead. He bled like anyone else. Just an old alien who learned that lies were easier than truth. Your empire is built on fear. Well, we're not afraid anymore. And now, you shouldn't be either." The broadcast reached the Velkari fleet, every ship, every crew member. They saw their High Celestial dead on the floor. They saw a human standing over him. They saw the truth they had been denying. Some ships immediately retreated. Others stopped fighting and just floated in space. A few kept attacking but with no coordination, no leadership. The fleet was breaking apart. On Earth, the human defenders saw it too. They pressed their attack. They destroyed confused Velkari ships. They pushed forward. The tide was turning. But on the divine throne, Minjun was dying. Zarthun's blade had cut deep. He was losing blood fast. Sarah crawled over to him. She was hurt bad too. "We did it," she said. "We killed a god. We told the truth." Minjun corrected. "That's all we did. That's all we ever had to do. We told the truth." Rescue teams found them an hour later. By then, the battle was over. The Velkari fleet had fled. Earth was saved. Humanity had won. But the cost was terrible. Thousands dead, cities damaged, ships destroyed. Minjun spent 2 weeks in medical care. He almost died 3 times. But he survived. Humans always survived. The galaxy watched what happened at Earth. They saw recordings of the battle. They saw Zarthun fall. They saw that the Velkari could be beaten. And, across 47 subjugated worlds, beings who had bowed to false gods began to stand up straight. The first uprising happened on Rithani Prime. 3 days after Zarthun died, the Rithani had bowed to the Velkari for 500 years. They had built temples. They had given offerings. They had taught their children that the Valkyrie were gods who deserved obedience. Then they saw the recordings from Earth. They saw a human kill their god with a simple knife. They saw the truth about the divine conquest protocol. They learned they had been lied to for centuries. The Rithani burned their temples. They surrounded the Valkyrie compound on their planet. When the Valkyrie tried to use their holographic tricks, the Rithani just laughed. They knew the truth, now. They refused to bow anymore. Similar rebellions started on other worlds. The Korath, the Zenim, the Pelkar, species that had submitted generations ago, suddenly remembered they had once been free. The recordings from Earth spread like fire through the galaxy. Every subjugated world saw them. Every slave species learned the truth. The Valkyrie Empire began to collapse. On Earth, Captain Minjun Park recovered slowly. Minjun did not feel lucky. He felt tired and guilty. Thousands had died in the battle. He knew it was necessary. He knew there was no choice. But the weight of all those deaths sat heavy on his chest. Sarah Chen visited him in the hospital. Her arm was in a sling, but she was walking. She brought him news from around the galaxy. The Valkyrie homeworld is in chaos, she said. Their government fell. Most of their fleet surrendered. Some ships are fleeing to unknown space. A delegation wants to meet with Earth. Minjun sat up. A delegation? What do they want? Peace, Sarah said. They want to surrender formally. And they're asking for help. Minjun laughed. It hurt his ribs. They want our help? After trying to exterminate us? It gets stranger, Sarah continued. The delegation says most Valkyrie civilians never knew the truth about their empire. They were taught they were chosen by destiny. They believed it. Now they know it's all lies. They're ashamed. Some are suicidal. Their entire culture is falling apart. General Martinez arrived later that day. She looked older than before the war. The stress had aged her. She sat by Minjun's bed and sighed. The United Earth government wants your opinion, she said. Do we help the Valkyrie? Or do we let them burn? Minjun thought about it. He remembered the bodies floating in space. The ruins of Luna Base. The people who died because Valkyrie claimed to be gods. Part of him wanted revenge. Wanted to see them suffer like they made others suffer. But another part remembered something. The Valkyrie had once been slaves themselves. They had been victims before they became monsters. Breaking that cycle meant being better than they were. We help them, he said finally. But on our terms. No more empire. No more divine claims. They join the galaxy as equals, or not at all. The Valkyrie delegation arrived on Earth 2 weeks later. They came on an unarmed transport. No weapons. No tricks. Just a small group of civilians who looked terrified and ashamed. The leader was a young Valkyrie woman named Silin. She was barely an adult by their standards. She had lost her entire family in the battle at Earth. Her father had been a ship captain who believed he was serving divine will. Her mother and sister were on Luna Base, studying human culture. They died when Zarthun destroyed it. Celine stood before the United Earth government with tears in her large eyes. I do not ask for forgiveness, she said. What my people did is unforgivable. We killed your people. We tried to enslave you. We lied to the entire galaxy. I only ask that you judge us as individuals, not as a species. Some of us want to change. Some of us want to be better. Ambassador Okonkwo studied the young alien. Why should we trust you? Your people claim to be gods. They murdered thousands. They ruled through fear and deception. Because your Captain Park showed us something important, Celine replied. She looked directly at Minjun, who sat in the audience. He showed us that truth is stronger than lies. That mortality is nothing to be ashamed of. That being powerful does not mean deserving worship. My people forgot those lessons. We need to learn them again. And we cannot do it alone. The debate in the Earth government lasted 3 days. Some wanted to reject the Velkari completely, let them figure out their own problems. Others wanted to help but with strict conditions. A few wanted revenge. Min Jun was asked to testify. He stood before the assembly and spoke from his heart. "I lost friends in this war," he said. "I almost died. I killed someone with my own hands. I understand anger. I understand the desire for revenge. But I also understand something else. We did not fight this war to become conquerors. We fought it to stay free. If we turn the Velkari into our enemies forever, we become what they were. Rulers who demand submission. That's not who we are." The vote was close. But in the end, humanity chose mercy. They would help the Velkari rebuild. But there were conditions. The empire was dissolved. All subjugated species were freed. The Velkari would share all their technology freely. And they would join a new galactic coalition of free worlds as equals. Not subjects, not rulers, equals. The coalition formed quickly. The freed species joined eagerly. The Rithani, the Korath, dozens of others. They had been slaves. Now, they were free. They wanted to make sure no one else ever suffered the same way. Earth became the symbolic center of the coalition. Not because humans demanded it, but because everyone remembered who had refused to bow, who had fought back, who had shown the galaxy that false gods could bleed. 6 months after the war, Min Jun stood at a memorial on Earth. 50,000 names were carved into black stone. Everyone who died in the conflict with the Velkari. Soldiers, civilians, scientists, children. All of them were there. Silene stood beside him. She had been working with Earth's cultural exchange program, learning about humanity, teaching about the Velkari, building bridges between former enemies. "Do you hate us?" she asked quietly. Min Jun looked at the names on the wall. So many names. So much death. Did he hate the Velkari? Some days yes. Some days no. Most days he just felt tired. "I hate what your people did," he said. "I hate the lies, the arrogance, the cruelty. But you're not your people. You're you. And you're trying to be better. That matters." "My father died on one of the ships you destroyed," Silene said. "He thought he was serving divine will. He died believing he was righteous. I cannot hate you for killing him. He would have killed you, but I mourn him anyway." They stood in silence for a while. Two people from different worlds, both carrying grief, both trying to build something better from the ruins of war. General Martinez found them there an hour later. She looked almost happy. "Captain Park, we have a situation. The Korath discovered a species being threatened by raiders. They're asking for coalition help. We need someone to lead the response." Min Jun looked at her. "Why me?" "Because you understand what we're building here," she said. "Not an empire. Not a new set of rulers. A partnership, where strong species protect weak ones not for worship or tribute, but because it's right." Min Jun thought about his parents, about the cult that destroyed them, about Zarthun and his lies, about all the false gods humanity had killed throughout history. Then he thought about what came after, about building instead of destroying, about mercy instead of revenge. "I'll go," he said. "But I'm taking Silene with me. The galaxy needs to see humans and Velkari working together." Silen looked surprised. "You trust me?" "Not yet," Min Jun said honestly. "But trust has to start somewhere." 3 days later, the EDF Indomitable launched from Earth. The ship had been fully repaired. New armor, new weapons, new crew to replace those who died. But Min Jun kept the scars on the hull. He wanted everyone to remember what the ship had been through, what it had survived. Silene stood on the bridge beside him. She wore a coalition uniform now. Not Velkari, not human. Something new. Something that represented what they were all trying to build. "Captain," Sarah Chen said from her station. We have a transmission from the Korath. They're thanking us for coming. They say it's an honor to work with the species that killed gods. Minjun smiled. Not a happy smile. A tired smile. A smile that said he understood the burden of the title but would carry it anyway. Tell them we did not kill gods, he said. We just proved they never existed. The real work is teaching the galaxy to stand on its own feet. No more gods. No more masters. Just people trying to be better than they were yesterday. The Indomitable jumped to faster than light speed. Behind it, Earth grew smaller. Ahead, the galaxy waited. A galaxy without gods. A galaxy still learning what freedom meant. A galaxy that was broken, but healing. Minjun looked at the memorial picture he kept on his console. 50,000 names. 50,000 reasons to keep fighting. Not for conquest. Not for glory. But to make sure no one else ever had to die for refusing to kneel. They claimed to be gods, he said quietly. Until we showed them they were wrong. Now we teach the galaxy what comes after gods. We teach them that truth is better than lies. That freedom is better than slavery. That mortality is not weakness. It's what makes us cherish every moment we have. Celine looked at him. And if new false gods appear? Minjun's smile turned cold. The smile of someone who had killed before and would do it again, if necessary. Then we remind them what happened to the last ones. We remind them that humanity does not bow, and we make sure they bleed just like everyone else. The ship traveled deeper into space. Toward new challenges, new threats, new opportunities to prove that the age of gods was over. The age of free people had begun. And if anyone tried to claim divinity again, humanity would be waiting. Ready to shatter that illusion. Ready to show them that false gods die just like everyone else, bleeding and broken and wondering why they ever thought they were special. The galaxy would remember Earth. Not as conquerors, not as new rulers, but as the species that refused to kneel. The species that killed gods. The species that chose freedom even when it meant death. And that memory would echo through the stars forever.